Manager.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Dare County Board of Commissioners, Tuesday, May the 5th, 2020 Board of Commissioners meeting. At this time, I'd like to read an invocation that was sent to us, provided by the Reverend Keith Dye of the Emmanuel Lutheran Church in Southern Shores. Good and gracious God, thank you for the new day and these committed people who have dedicated themselves to Dare County. You have blessed us with extraordinary talent and equipped us to be a beacon of light to the many we welcome and serve. Guide the work of this commission, especially in the midst of difficult circumstances presented by the current pandemic, to meet the challenges that lie ahead. Inspire us as we provide leadership and support to those who earn their livelihood here. Guard workers and employers that they may go about their business safely and fruitfully. We offer our gratitude for the many minds and hands that work together to maintain our home as a haven for our residents and as a place for relaxation and leisure for our guests. We praise you and bless you for the wonder of your creation, and we are humbled by the very blessing you place in our midst. For you all good things come. May we reflect the goodness in our intentions, our words, and our actions toward one another. We humbly ask these things in your holy name. Amen.
Amen.
May we stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
County Manager.
Good morning. Item 1, Mr. Chairman, is the chairman's opening remarks.
Thank you, County Manager. Appreciate it. I'll be very brief this morning, gentlemen. Yesterday, May the 4th, the county began a phased reentry program for our non-resident property owners of Dare County. We want to take this opportunity to welcome them back. We know it's been extremely difficult for them and not being here. With that said, it's important to remember that we all need to be patient and act with compassion and kindness with one another. Circumstances and regulations may limit the accessibility of some services and certain businesses that may not be operating as they once had before COVID-19. There may be longer waits at stores. Face masks may be required for visiting local businesses or places where social distancing is difficult to maintain. And restaurants may be limited to takeout only. This has been an extremely difficult time for everyone, and many in our community continue to struggle because of this virus. No matter where you live, here or one of our welcoming guests, visitors, or non-residents, please remember we're all in this together, and together we can help ensure that everyone stays safe and healthy. Thank you. County Manager?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, item 2 on the agenda is public comment, and if we'll take a minute to let you read any public comment that we received. Everybody ready? Mr. Chairman, items 3 and 4 on the agenda are public hearings with regards to those two matters. They were time specific to 10 o'clock, and I apologize for doing them at 10, but we sent the notices and all that stuff out before we knew we were going to be doing virtual meetings and all that, and we would have had to republish and do a whole lot of things to change them, so we left them on there. If we finish the agenda early, we'll recess for a few minutes until we get to 10 o'clock, and then we'll have those two public hearings.
Okay.
Item 5 on the agenda is a proclamation for EMS Week. If you'd like, I'll read that proclamation.
Please, if you will, County Manager.
This is a 2020 EMS Week proclamation. Whereas emergency medical services are a vital public service, and whereas the members of emergency medical services teams are ready to provide life-saving care to those in need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And whereas access to quality emergency care dramatically improves the survival and recovery rate of those who experience sudden illness or injury. And whereas emergency medical services are the community's medical care safety net, fills gaps and provides access to the healthcare system by delivering important out-of-hospital care, including preventative education and activities, life-saving and time-critical interventions, and acute and non-acute medical services. Whereas emergency medical service personnel serve our community on the front lines, often with personal sacrifices of being away from their families on holidays, in all types of adverse weather environments, and facing numerous threats to ensure our community receives the best care possible. And whereas the emergency medical services system consists of first responders, emergency medical technicians, paramedics, emergency medical dispatchers, administrators, emergency nurses, emergency physicians, and out-of-hospital medical care providers. And whereas the members of emergency medical services teams engage in thousands of hours of specialized training and continuing education to enhance their life-saving skills. And whereas it is appropriate to recognize the value and the accomplishments of emergency medical services providers by designating Emergency Medical Services Week. And whereas with this year's national theme for Emergency Medical Services Week, EMS Strong, Ready Today, Preparing for Tomorrow. Now therefore be it resolved, the Dare County Board of Commissioners, in recognition of this event, do hereby proclaim the week of May 17th through 23rd, 2020, as Emergency Medical Services Week, this the 5th day of May 2020.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to add, if we could, to this resolution. As you know, in the past few months, we've had several of our high-ranking officials in Dare County EMS all retired, recently passed away. And I would like to honor them during this week of EMS Week and to add the clause, therefore, be it further resolved, EMS Week in Dare County shall also be held in honor and memory of the recent passing of former EMS Captain Denny Shoup, EMS Captain Billy Deans, Chief Dare Med-Flight Pilot Sammy Pleasure, and also Director of Med-Flight Operations and Chief Med-Flight Pilot Chad Jones, for their service and dedication has helped to lead us to be EMS Strong, ready today, and prepared for tomorrow.
Thank you, Commissioner House. What's the pleasure of the board?
Motion to approve.
There's a motion on the floor by Commissioner Bateman to approve the 2020 EMS Week of Proclamation and to add the clause that Commissioner House just read. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Tobin and Vice Chair Overman. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.
Chairman, next is item 6 on the agenda, and that's a proclamation for Older Americans Month, and with your permission, I'll read that as well.
Yes, sir.
This is Older Americans Month 2020. Whereas Dare County includes a growing number of older Americans who make countless contributions to our community every day. Whereas Dare County is stronger when people of all ages, abilities, and backgrounds are included and encouraged to make their mark, and recognizes the importance of the physical, mental, social, and emotional well-being of all of its citizens. And whereas Dare County can support our community by promoting independence, inclusion, and participation, engaging older adults through education, recreation, and service, and connecting people with opportunities to share their time, experience, and talents. Now therefore be it resolved, the Dare County Board of Commissioners does hereby proclaim May 2020 to be Older Americans Month, and urges every resident to recognize older adults and the people who support them as essential members of our community. This the 5th day of May, 2020.
Okay, pleasure of the board.
Move to approve.
There's a motion on the floor to approve this Older American Month 2020 from Commissioner House. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded from Commissioner Ross. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Pose like sign. Motion carries unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, item 7 on the agenda, Dave Clausen's going to handle, and I'll move out of the way and lead him to the podium.
Good morning, Dave.
Good morning. This item is to basically finish up what we started last year. At the board retreat last year, you saw a presentation on the capital investment fund and a debt affordability model, and we implemented that. And we're almost through the first year of that. And part of that was to look at what our policies would also be and what DEC associates and financial advisors were going to recommend those policies to be. Then what we do is look back at what the results were at the end of last year, June 30, 2019, and apply what we're going to recommend those policies to be. So this we were going to do and present at your board retreat that we did not have. We've still got 2 months of the fiscal year to refine this and change it if we need to. Based on our budget work so far, I'm pretty sure that we're going to be sticking with these numbers unless you want to do something different than what we're recommending. The recommendation for the policies that we're making is first in the general fund unassigned fund balance. That's your free and clear fund balance at the end of any year. That we have a target of 21%. And after talking with Doug Carter, we're changing the recommendation that you're seeing on your screen. We don't want to use the consolidated general fund, which is the general fund, the capital investment fund, the law enforcement officer special separation allowance, and the disaster recovery. He's covered it with contacts at rating agencies, and using his judgment, he thinks we're just okay with just the general fund. That's our number 10 fund, is just the operations. So it'd be 21% of the number 10 general fund. Then what can you do with the amounts over that target to write into your policy? You can leave it in the general fund and have more than 21%. Add to the fund balance of the capital investment fund, or use it to fund or partially fund a capital project. We also want to add in there that if it's a true one-time expenditure, that you could use it for that one-time expenditure, because what the agencies and we don't want to see is trying to use fund balance, a one-time revenue source, for expenditures that are going to be recurring, because you'll just run out of money for it. You can use it to add to the fund balance of the disaster recovery fund, add to the fund balance of the law enforcement officer special separation fund, to establish or add to an irrevocable trust for a law enforcement officer special separation allowance. And we are working on those trust documents. I've got the first draft back from the attorney. Or to add to the irrevocable trust that you already have for OPEB, which is other post-employment benefits, which really means retiree health cost. Then on the disaster recovery fund, that you have a target for the total fund balance of that of 1% of the general fund budget, the operating fund budget, number 10. That's because to get a FEMA declaration, you have to aggregate all the cost and damages in the state. And for units of local government, I believe with Dorian, it was 14 million statewide. So we've had situations before where we have damages in Dare County, but there's not enough in the state to get a declaration from FEMA. There's a state emergency declaration statute, and the threshold for declaration is 1% of your general fund budget. So our exposure is if we have less than 1% of the general fund budget, we don't get a declaration of any kind. Then in the capital investment fund, based on what they've used in other counties and cities that have done this and input they've got from the rating agencies, to use a coverage target so that the coverage would be ending fund balance divided by the debt service for that same year. And our recommendation is a minimum of 0.33 with a target of 0.5. So your goal would be to have half of that year's debt service sitting in fund balance as a protection for exactly what we're in right now. So what we're recommending to do with last year's ending fund balance, the final amount over 21% was $5,448,779. Over in the far right column is what we ended up with, and the difference between what we were going to recommend at the board workshop and what we're recommending now is the debt service savings that we got from the debt refunding that's going to close a week from today. So our recommendation is to move $3,437,104 over to the capital investment fund, which our priority working through that we assumed was your priority because the animal shelter's already started. Health and Human Services bids are this afternoon, and COA is in process of detailed drawings, which I haven't checked with Angie in about a month, but probably another month of detailed drawing work. Then to clean up, we have the EMS helicopter project. If you remember, we had the old EMS helicopter when we bought the new helicopter. We had an appraisal. We had two appraisals. The old helicopter sold for half of what the lowest appraisal was. This $200,565 will clean that up, put it to bed once and for all. Then transfer to disaster recovery fund of $413,437. That will get that fund balance to 1% of this year's general fund balance.
Which is approximately 1.1 million, 1% of the operating budget?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
just a little bit less, yeah. And then leaving the general fund, that will leave $1,397,000 more than the 21% target. And with what we've done so far with the budget, if our projected actuals for this year are perfect, which they're not, but we'll end up with about $800,000 over that 21%. And then we're using that $800,000 in 2021. So if projected actuals are perfect and next year's budget is perfect, we'll end up with 21% at the end of next year. So what we're asking you to do is instruct me to come back with a draft of our financial policies incorporating those recommendations. Then there's a budget amendment for the general fund, budget amendment for capital investment, budget amendment for disaster recovery, and amendment to the capital project ordinance for the EMS helicopter.
Thank you, Dave. Does anybody have any questions today with respects to item 7? Then the pleasure of the board.
Move to approve.
There's a motion on the floor by the vice chairman to direct staff to return with an update of the county financial policies, including the recommendations, adopt the budget amendment for the general fund, adopt the budget amendment for the capital investment fund, adopt the budget amendment for the disaster recovery fund, and to adopt the amendments to the capital project ordinance for the EMS helicopter project. Is there a second?
Second.
It's seconded by Commissioner Tobin and Commissioner House. Floor is open for further discussion. Hearing none, those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous. Thank you, Dave. County Manager?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. That brings us to item 8 on the agenda. In your agenda package, you have some tax map pictures that we have. Over where the new COA campus is going to be in the corner, trying to get my directions right, to the west, right beside Jay Wheelis's law office is a little trapezoid-shaped parcel of land. He's got a letter in there that I think we shared with you, but the gist of it is that when they bought the property way back, his father bought that property, they thought they owned that piece of land. When you go back and look at the deeds and look at the deed we got, the deed they got, it's fairly clear they don't own that land, that was part of the Dare County parcel. He would like to buy that parcel from us so that he could have what he thought he was buying way back in the day when his dad bought it. He tells me that if he's ever going to expand his office or his parking or any of that, he's got to have some more land to do that. And so anyway, he's requested that we entertain an offer to sell that land, and I told him that I would bring that to you all and see if we were interested in selling it or not, and if we were, then we'd get back to him and negotiate something and follow the statute, because you've got to do some publications and things like that. And if we were not, then I would tell him that we were not interested in selling, and that would be it. And so it's before you. You have his letter before you. You see the map that's there, the tax information that's there, and I need guidance on whether to move forward with talking to him or not.
Bobby, do we have any use for that property? It's a small piece of square footage.
It's a part of that campus site, and so it's square footage to the extent that we need square footage. In terms of our plans, our current construction plans and all that, it's not going to be developed. I mean, there's nothing going to be built on that. That's not going to be part of the entranceway or any of that. You know, what it would do for the future, I don't know, but, you know, it's a pretty large site.
And just to help you with that, Vice Chair, the other stuff that we would like to do long-term on that campus will already fit in that footprint.
In the footprint we have.
That we have.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it anyway. I just want
Right.
to get that on the record.
Right.
So it
Right.
there is a preliminary site plan that shows that that land wouldn't be needed?
Yeah, yeah. We've got a couple of things that we'd like to do down the road, long-term, Commissioner, and it fits in that footprint that we wouldn't need that piece.
The current construction of what we're doing now is going to be almost right in the middle of that site, so it won't be near this piece.
I'd move to entertain an offer.
Okay.
Entertain Jay's offer.
I'll second.
The Vice Chair's made a recommendation or a motion to entertain an offer from Mr. Wheelis, and it's been seconded by Commissioner Bateman and House. Any further discussion?
I was just
Commissioner
going to
Roy.
ask County Manager, it looks like an unusual shaped parcel. And I was just curious, do we know why that may not have been sold with the original purchase, or was it just so long ago, we're just not sure?
I don't know, because I mean.
Yeah, fair, that's fair.
The COA site was purchased or given, or however they acquired it, by the Board of Education, I mean, many, many years ago, I think.
Yeah.
And so way back then, I have no idea what the discussions were.
It just, again, just looks a bit unusual there, but
Right.
fair
Yeah,
enough.
it's an odd shape. It's an odd shape, yeah.
Bobby, let me ask you this, on the map here, it says, Bricks versus LLC versus Dare County, what does that mean? On the preliminary description,
It says what?
it says Bricks LLC versus Dare County preliminary.
Primary.
Bricks LLC is the name of the LLC that owns Jay Wheelis's
Okay.
site. And when Dwight bought it, thinking he got that, and then it showed on our tax maps that we owned it, he said something to the tax office, oh, wait a minute, that's mine. So they show it as a disputed
Okay,
parcel. But when you go back and do the title, it's not disputed, and Jay acknowledges that it's not disputed as well. So.
Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, then those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.
Chairman, item 9 is the consent agenda. If there's anything on the consent agenda that anyone would like to discuss, say so, and we'll pull it off and handle that matter independently after we've adopted the remaining part of the consent agenda.
Move to approve consent agenda.
Okay, Commissioner House has moved to approve the consent agenda as presented. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Commissioner Tobin. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Pose like sign. Motion carries unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, that'd be your agenda.
All right, we'll go into commissioner's business, manager's business, and then once that's done, we'll come back to item 3 and 4. Commissioner House, would you mind kicking it off first this morning, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In our EMS resolution, I mentioned some of our retired comrades that have passed. And one of them, the 3 of them that I've mentioned in prior meetings, one of them I have not because it was so recent. Saturday, a week ago, Jonathan Chad Jones was our Dare Medflight Chief Pilot and Director of Operations for Dare Medflight. He passed away suddenly, and my condolences go out to his family and also to the EMS community here in Dare County. He was well known and well loved. I remember Chad, when he first came to work for Dare County EMS as an EMT, worked his way up to be a flight paramedic and decided he wanted to fly the thing. So he went off and he got his pilot's license for roto wing and came back to Dare County to be an EMS helicopter pilot and rose up through the ranks to be chief pilot and director of operations. Very outstanding gentleman in the community. His entire immediate family is in Dare County EMS or retired from Dare County EMS, so he was carrying on a family tradition, which is like how we see many of our residents here in Dare County do. My thoughts and prayers go out to, like I said, his family and also the EMS community. Fly high, my friend. You're always with us. And with that, later on today, he will be, in lieu of the pandemic that we're in, the family has decided to hold off on an actual funeral for him. However, today, Chad will receive his final EMS dispatch in his final flight on Dare Med Flight and will be escorted by Dare County EMS from First Flight Airstrip back to the Manio hangar. I urge all of our community to line the streets between those two places and pay your respects as this fine gentleman put his life on the line several times to protect and serve you.
What time is that, Commissioner?
That will start out at hopefully about 1:30.
1:30 in front of this building. Out
In front of this building.
64.
So a little bit prior to that from the trip from the First Flight Airstrip. So I would say probably about 1 o'clock in that ballpark
Is that today?
today.
Okay.
And it'll come from the airstrip here?
It'll go down 64, and so if you were going to, and so we're going to be out here on the street.
So it's coming to here and then it's going back?
No, it's coming, it'll drive from First Flight Airstrip to the hangar at the airport where we keep the helicopter, and that's where it'll stay. And
I'm still confused.
they're going to, his remains will be driven from First Flight Airport on the highway to the Dare EMS hangar here in Manio.
So what is the deal here?
And so people are asked if they are willing to line the route to pay their respects as the procession goes by.
Okay.
All right.
Is it coming into this complex here, Bobby,
It
or
is
just
not.
down 64?
It is not.
It's just coming down 64 and approximately
has nothing to do
1:30.
1:30 here, yes.
Okay.
All right. One other thing. As you know, they've gone back into short session in Raleigh and they are putting out a lot of stuff for the COVID-19 pandemic. One of the things that's been a high topic is relief for our commercial fishermen. And House Bill 1045 has been introduced, which is an emergency assistance for commercial fishermen. And in that, if once approved, would be appropriation to the sum of $10 million. And that'll be a non-recurring basis coming out of the general fund and to be given to the Department of Environmental Quality to be allocated to the Division of Marine Fisheries to administer an emergency assistance program for commercial fishing and for-hire fishing operations license holders who have suffered economic loss from COVID-19. So I wanted to put that out there and get that on the record, and hopefully that it has strong support in Raleigh. I feel if we put out a resolution in support of it, would be a good measure. But also, like I said, it has strong support in Raleigh. I don't think it's going to have any problem going through. So I would take the pleasure of the board if you want to submit a resolution in support of it. I would be in favor of that.
Does that include fish dealers, or is
It
it just?
does. It does. It includes all fishing licenses that pertain to commercial fishing. So it would be also fish house dealers license.
How much money did you say that was?
10 million.
10 million.
10 million. They're gonna be there just for a short period, so.
Yeah, so like I said, it'd be kind of hard to get us.
I mean, for us to do a resolution,
Exactly.
but it has strong,
It does have strong weight in Raleigh. I've been in contact with not the sponsor of the bill, but several of the co-sponsors, and they feel very strongly about it. And I would, instead of just doing a resolution, like I said, it would take time for us to get it
Right.
up there. And they're probably going to hear some of this today. I can pass along to them that our support.
yeah, I mean, we
And-
need to
and
reach
do it.
out to Representative Haynick Steinberg and let them know we fully support.
Yeah, and Representative Haney is actually one of the co-sponsors.
Right.
Yeah.
What's
Right.
going to be the application process to this?
I'm not exactly sure. That's some of the fine print once it gets appropriated.
I know, Wally, one time, they did a similar bill up there, when we had Hurricane Dennis and Floyd back to back. And they based it off your landings from the previous 3 years. And then you got a percentage of that. And, I actually took advantage of that program.
Right.
And it was a one-page application. It was super easy. Whereas SBA was pushing their stuff, and SBA stuff was a nightmare.
Yeah, it is.
And give you a little bit of background too, not this bill, there was a previous draft bill that went out prior to this, went out for about 12 hours and they got pulled back. The sponsor pulled it back, and that bill was only for a $1 million relief. And that would be coming out of the Fisherman's Monetary Fund, which that fund should not be used for this type of relief. So that's when this bill was introduced and bumped it from 1 million, because as you know, at 1 million with the number of commercial fishermen we have, would have been next to nothing. So this was a fairly substantial 10 million that would go out, come out of the general fund and not out of the fishermen's funds.
Yeah, I mean, that's plus, that's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if the board, if we could get consensus, we could let Representative Haynick know that we have a consensus
Yeah.
that we fully support
And
it.
I think that way we can move it faster.
So is that the pleasure of the board then?
I got it, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, all
I'll give them a call right after the meeting.
right.
Steve, I got a question for you. In conversation with a couple of my fishermen down in Hatteras Way, they tell me that they're not being able to apply for the 1099 unemployment or getting no results.
So the PUD,
Yeah,
yeah, that has been pretty rough at the federal level. When they opened it up, the PUD for 1099 or self-employed, they got overwhelmed. And that's why now they're looking at additional funds for COVID relief to get into that program. But it's been rough. I've heard a lot of horror stories about you trying to get into it and either being denied because one individual I know was denied because his 1099 corporate taxes were not properly prepared from the prior year. And that's just one instance. But there's anything like with the federal government, if you don't dot all your T's and cross all your I's, then there's problems. And I have heard of quite a few people that are having problems with it, and they're trying, from what I understand, the federal government's trying to get a better handle on that. I know Senator Tillis is aware of it, and Senator Burr is aware of it, and they've been getting calls and emails left and right like we have, and they're working on it. So hopefully they'll get it worked out.
I think also that they're having a problem with the Small Business Administration
Yes.
loans also.
Yeah.
They're just not getting any of it.
Yeah. So,
We have a consensus then. We can reach out. Are you going to reach out to Representative Haney?
yeah, sure will.
Okay. Let him know
Sounds
that we
good.
have a consensus that we agree.
Cool. I sure will.
Support.
And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner House. Commissioner Ross?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I sat this morning thinking over today's meeting and what we have all been watching and going through, and I thought I would, and I apologize, but I've made several pages here of notes. I'll try to get through them quickly. In mid-March, we were all hit with something we've never seen in our lives before. We've never seen a crisis like this, and we've never experienced like this. We saw an unknown virus with a strange name, coronavirus, which didn't mean a whole lot, suddenly start spreading both across the country and across the world. And what we asked was, well, how contagious is this thing? How fast is it going to spread? Was it lethal? Was it deadly? And how much so? How can we treat people that get it and get sick? Is there a cure? Is there any treatment or drug or therapy for it? All of those questions came back with a myriad of answers, most of which we didn't know. So we responded. We responded to protect ourselves, our families, and our communities first and foremost. Frankly, what you saw most across the country was fear. Fear was all over, everywhere. So what we did, we began to restrict and isolate ourselves. We shut down travel, if you recall, international travel first, then domestic travel, then orders to restrict and stop non-essential travel. We shut down our businesses. We canceled and closed all the schools. We stopped all events, sporting events of every single kind. We effectively closed down gatherings, no meetings. We even closed the churches. Never thought I would see that happen. And obviously, we had no tourists and no visitors. The predictable result, our economy has gone into a tailspin. It basically crashed. Unemployment rates have exploded to unseen levels in decades since the Great Depression. Folks, not only from the virus, but now from economic peril, I think I'm not overstating it, became terrified. Your local leaders received, and I'm looking around at this group as well as others in the community, countless hundreds, and in the chairman's case, I think thousands is an accurate count, calls and emails that both criticized and condemned the actions to close our bridges and restrict the number of folks here to try and again respond to this unknown virus, while also receiving criticism and condemnation for having too many people already arrived and being here. We actually had some that were positive, appreciated the swift action that was taken. Unfortunately, what we've seen recently are some very unpleasant and some downright nasty statements, emails, comments toward our fellow neighbors, our citizens, our visitors, fellow residents. There's no place for it, and it shouldn't happen. I frankly didn't think that I would see that from our folks here in the Outer Banks, and it should never have happened. However, from that time in early to mid-March, we're now 7 weeks in, and thankfully, we have learned a great deal about this disease, this COVID-19. And for those of you that wonder where that name came from, it's simply a shorthand version of Coronavirus Disease 2019. What we know is it is really contagious, and it can spread rapidly. But we also learned an awful lot of other things about this virus's behavior and how it impacts the population. As of yesterday, North Carolina had reported just under 12,000 known cases. Dare County, thankfully, has had only 18, with virtually all of them recovered or recovering, and sadly, we lost one case. One person passed, someone who was in their 90s and died from the virus. As of yesterday, North Carolina had reported and documented 430 deaths. Our population in the state is 10.5 million. I'll repeat that. There are 430 deaths, and there are 10.5 million people in the state. If you are over 65, the population over 65 that was contained in the 430 who have passed, it equaled 87%, or 375. That means if you are under 65, in the state of North Carolina, 55 people have passed, and if you are under 50, 17 have died from the disease. These statistics are sad in many ways, but somewhat encouraging in terms of the number and count for those that are under 65. I won't go through the details, but recently there have been a number of serology tests conducted in New York, California, in Europe, and a serology test is a random sampling where blood is taken and sampled from the population in general to determine the presence of antibodies, which indicate that person has had and recovered from the coronavirus. These data, with the exclusion of perhaps Manhattan, the densely populated Manhattan, New York City, indicated 3 to 4% of a population has contracted the disease. Well, in North Carolina, that would put the count close to 400,000 people. I have not seen a serology test in North Carolina, but I've simply taken these data sets from disparate parts of the country and in Europe and extrapolated to say if we are typical or predictive, then 300,000 to 400,000 North Carolinians potentially have contracted the disease. If one does the calculation of our 430 deaths, that implies a mortality rate of about 0.15%. And for reference, influenza, which again is an annual disease that kills a lot of people in our country, has a mortality rate of about 0.1%. So what does that do? What does that indicate? We're confronted with these facts. This virus, fearful as it may have been, will be here with us for a while. It won't be eradicated. It's not going to leave the planet anytime in the next few months. With a vaccine, and until a vaccine is developed that can immunize the population broad scale, we will have to figure out ways to live our lives and live with the presence of this virus. In my opinion, we cannot continue to crush our economy as we have done with the impacts on jobs, livelihoods, businesses, careers, and frankly, families and dependents on those that are no longer able to work. That simply cannot stand. And again, I'm speaking for myself. I believe a much more focused or a rifle shot approach is needed in our strategy. What I was going to mention, and I will mention now, is that of those 375 people that have perished over age 65, 2/3 were residing in nursing homes and congregate living facilities. What does that tell us? That is a danger zone. We must protect those in those nursing homes and facilities. Zero tolerance. They have been locked down. My father-in-law lives here in Kill Devil Hills, at Spring Arbor. We cannot see him. My wife cannot see him, and we're okay with that. He's fine. The residents there are fine. Zero tolerance. They are protected. They are isolated. Nobody gets in and out. If you're over 65, and especially with an underlying condition, most seriously diabetes, obesity, hypertension, asthma, you must use personal caution, exercise caution, and take extra steps to protect yourself. You are vulnerable. If you become sick, if anyone becomes sick, we should isolate, contact trace where they have been, treat their illness. We now have therapies that are emerging rapidly. A drug called remdesivir and another called hydroxychloroquine have been published and put on the news to show significant improvement for patients suffering from this virus. The rest of us, I believe, should return to our daily lives, practicing the things we've now learned. Good hygiene, frequent washing of hands. If we're sick, stay home. Don't go out. If you're in public, be mindful of others. If you can't keep a safe distance, use a mask. I would ask that we address this with respect, thoughtfulness, not fear, and understand that it will take modified behaviors and consideration, but we must, in my opinion, return to a sense of normalcy, both in our county, our state, and our country. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm done.
Thank you, Commissioner Ross. Commissioner Tobin?
Well, first, I would like to say thank you to Commissioner Ross for that fantastic overview of the current situation, and I agree 100%.
Thank you, sir.
100%. And I have been approached by countless people in Dare County that want to reopen the county. I think the control group has done a fine job, but I think it's time that we take the next step and start letting visitors back in. With that said, next week, Steve and I will be traveling down to Florida to go to the last shipyard for the dredge project. Good news, kind of good news, bad news with the crushing oil industry. There's been a lot of shipyards that have had projects put on hold because of actually some businesses going out of business. And the companies have come back, the shipbuilding companies have come back with some lower numbers. So that's very encouraging. Other than that, I was going to touch on the coronavirus, but Rob, you did such a fantastic job. I, once again, thank you for it.
Yes.
That's all I have, Chairman.
Commissioner Couch?
Yes, sir, and thank you, Rob. Hatteras Inlet, it's in bad shape. Can't get in, can't get out. Coast Guard, can't get in, can't get out. I was pleased to see in the consent agenda that the bring in the pipeline dredge Manio in there. Hopefully it'll help, but we need to keep our eye on that. We have a Waterways Commission meeting coming up next week. It's going to be a virtual meeting, but we're probably going to come back to this board for some support, whether it's reaching out and putting pressure on our federal guys to do what they got to do. If we're going to open back up, I mean, we can't even get out. If there's an incident occurs off of Diamond Shoals or anywhere off the stretch of Hatteras or coming up through Ocracoke, you know, it's going to take a helicopter. You're not going to be running boats in and out of there. So I want to keep our eye on that and do what needs to be done. And that's all I've got. Thanks again, Rob.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Bateman?
Yes, sir. Couple of things. The first one, public comment. I want people out there in TV land to understand that when the manager asks for public comment, we get the majority of those comments prior to the meeting. As a matter of fact, the only one I did not have today, which I read during that period of time, was one from the Home Builders Association, which I didn't have. But a lady called me up and said, "It only took you 3 minutes to read all the public comments." And I went, "No, they were prior to that." So, and those who did not understand that, we've had them prior to this meeting here. Bob, I want to thank you and all the commissioners, as well as everybody in Dare County, for doing an outstanding job during this epidemic we've had. And Bob, I want to thank you because you've been a lightning rod. It's like-
You think?
To say the
You
least.
think?
But, you know, I talk to Bob every morning, and some days it's a great conversation. Other days, you know, it's just.
You wished
can't-
you hadn't have called me, right?
I know, you can't be inundated 24 hours a day, and he is, as we are, with all the emails coming in, and not have it being a burden on you. And so I appreciate all you're doing and stepping up to the plate. Commissioner Ross, thank you for your comments there. They were right on point, and I agree with everything you said. We were thrown into a situation that we've never dealt with before. And having said that, as we come out of this thing, and it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough on the non-resident property owners. It's going to be tough on the businesses. It's going to be tough on the locals. It's going to be tough on everybody economically, because you guys understand more so than anybody else, because we're in a budgetary process now, that the economy is so fragile down here. It depends on everybody being together and working together. We've got to have the non-resident property owners. We've got to have the tourists to make this little fragile economy of ours work. So we can have the hospitals we can have the schools, and we have the best of everything. And it's because of all the entities that we have down here working together, living in harmony. As I said before, unity in the community. Without that, we have nothing. So anyway, I appreciate what everybody's done here, and the message to everybody is, you know, in the words of Rodney King, we got to get along, and we got to be respectful of everybody, and understand where our bread is buttered, and that's from the economic development that's brought by visitors here on the Outer Banks. Tourism is what makes this place work, and that's all I got there. Bobby, do you want to address the issue on the resolution? You mean bring it up, or do you want to do it?
If you bring it up, and then I'll read the resolution when
Okay.
you explain it.
I asked Bobby, in talking to Senator Burr's office and Tom Tillis's office, as well as Murphy, a lot of us are blessed to receive the PPP money. When they threw that out there, they were in such a hurry to get it out there. They didn't tailor it to be accommodating to small businesses the way maybe it should have been. A couple of things going on, and give you behind the scenes. If you received your money on the 20th of April, you have 8 weeks from that day of deposit in your account to have that money, which is 75% from 75% goes to payroll, and then 25% goes to overhead and interest and stuff like that. If you're not open, as we've been under an order from the governor not be able to be open, you in essence have 6 weeks, 7 weeks that you could not use the money. And so what the resolution that I asked Bobby to put together kind of delays that action until the governor even opens the businesses and frees us up. So it starts, the 8 week would start then, which enable the businesses to bring that back at their employees, which is what the intent of the original note was for, was to generate business. So anyway, I'm gonna ask Bobby to read the resolution.
Sure.
And if y'all have any questions, how this is maybe working in my case, I'd be glad to answer your questions.
This is a resolution requesting payroll protection program modifications. Whereas the tourism economy of Dare County annually generates over $109 million in state and local tax revenues each year, and whereas the sustainability of Dare County's tourism economy is dependent on small businesses providing services for the tourism industry, including hotels, motels, property managers, restaurants, retail shops, attractions, outdoor recreation, grocers, fishing charters, equipment rentals, housekeeping services, and other service providers. And whereas many of these small businesses have benefited from the opportunity to participate in the payroll protection program and have received an approved loan with the opportunity for forgiveness given the appropriate use of the funds within 8 weeks of the first disbursement. And whereas restrictions remain in place limiting travel except for essential purposes and preventing the opening of certain businesses until May 8, 2020 under Governor Cooper's Executive Order 135. And whereas many businesses who participated in the payroll protection program cannot hire to full capacity and meet the loan forgiveness requirements until restrictions are lifted or eased and non-essential travel resumes. Now therefore be it resolved, the Dare County Board of Commissioners request the payroll protection program be modified to allow banking and loan institutions to accept an alternative 8 week measurement period. If a business cannot fully open within 1 week of the first disbursement of funds, the 8-week measurement period should begin on the date the governor allows businesses to open or when visitors are allowed to return to the area, whichever date is later. This is the 5th day of May, 2020.
Pleasure of the board.
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Bateman. Motion
Second.
by Commissioner Bateman, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Tobin. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.
I'd like to also have that sent to the senators and the congressman's office, as well as the local representatives through the House and the Senate. Please.
Okay.
Thank you. Anything else?
I'm done.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner, Vice Chairman Overman.
Bob, it's 10 o'clock.
Yes, 10 o'clock. You want to do through, or you want to get through
We can
this?
finish this and then we can.
We
do
can
that.
finish? Okay. Go ahead, Vice Chair.
First of all, I'd like to thank the NCDOT Ferry Division dredge operation, and especially Jed Dixon and Lance Winslow for rearranging the dredging schedule in Hatteras. The dredge manio will now begin operations on the South Ferry Channel or the cut-through to Hatteras Inlet this week that will allow our watermen safe access to the ocean, and we really appreciate the work that they did to change that. Coming up, and we've had a chance to read in the agenda that we have here, I want to thank Donna Cree for her work on the flood damage prevention ordinance. There was a lot of effort that went into that, and Donna deserves a lot of credit for that work. I also like to ask Dave a question about, when in his presentation, about the FEMA requirements for a declaration that involved the whole state being a requirement for X amount of money, I guess, before you can get a declaration. And the question that I have regarding that is, you know, as a coastal county, we have situations where we can be devastated, but the rest of the state remains whole. And my question is, should coastal counties get together and petition the federal government through NACO possibly to change the way that is done? Is that something that would fit into what NACO could do for coastal counties?
Could they do it? Yeah, they could do it.
Is that something we should petition them for to look into, Bobby, or is this something that just is not one of those things that just ain't gonna happen?
I think it's something we can look into. I also think it's one of those things that just ain't gonna happen.
That's why I'm afraid that's what you're gonna say. But it doesn't make any sense, really. I mean, it's just one of these nonsensical things that that's the way it's always been. And maybe it's been questioned before, maybe it hasn't, I don't know. But it certainly seems like something that coastal counties, particularly on the East Coast and maybe the West Coast as well, but you just have a different dynamic here and a different situation where we can be killed with a storm, and you know, west of 95 sees nothing. It just don't make a lot of sense. And when you need a FEMA declaration to get some things done, you need that declaration. So just want to mention that. I also want to thank everyone for their continued mitigation efforts regarding COVID-19. Please continue to be vigilant and never forget where this came from. Always encourage Made in America. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Overman. Just a couple of comments. Wednesday, May the 6th, tomorrow morning, 8:30. The control group will hold its 33rd meeting concerning COVID-19. As I've stated in prior meetings, the control group is made up of the 6 mayors, the park superintendent, representative from Hatteras, Mr. Couch, and our sheriff, and myself as the chair. Everything you mentioned this morning, Commissioner Ross, this control group has thoroughly invested over 33 meetings. Everything you brought up.
Yes, sir.
This control group meets for almost 2.5 hours every single morning. They've looked at all the data. They've listened to our Health and Human Services Director report, all the scientific materials that are out there, science-based. We've listened to the CDC. We've listened to the governor. We listened to the President of the United States Task Force. The decisions that were made early on were not just to protect the citizens of Dare County, and there's going to be those of you out there that are viewing this morning is going to come back and say, oh, no, you know, da-da-da-da-da, whatever. We did this to protect the visitors as well as the non-resident property owners. It was clear that states had stay-at-home orders in place. Now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand what stay-at-home orders means, but that's what they had, and this control group took the necessary steps to restrict that, and the numbers reflect that that was the right decision. We continue to evaluate the situation. We know that our citizens and our business owners are hurting. We know it was a difficult decision. We know that it was difficult for visitors as well as non-resident property owners and as well as residents. But I will say it again, and I will repeat, it was the right decision. We also know that we've got to move forward, and we've got to certainly open things up. I get constant emails about open businesses, open businesses. I can't tell you enough, folks, if you're listening, that is the governor's decision. This was not made by the control group. We don't close businesses, and we don't open them back up. And if you've got that, reach out to the governor. You know, we want to open up as well, but our hands are tied as a group. We can't make those decisions. We know that we want to get people back. As I said earlier, Monday, just yesterday, we opened in a phased process for non-resident property owners to come back into the community. And we're hoping and praying that they'll do the basic things, and that is non-essential travel, wear a mask out in public, stay at home. If you do have to go out, make it essential, and protect yourself. That's all you have to do. And this virus will not spread throughout the county. We're hoping and praying that our non-residents will do that, and our residents will continue to do that. We know that we have to open up to visitors, and the control group is talking about that now. Hopefully there will be a decision that will be made soon with respects to that, and we will get that out to the public as quick as possible. But this control group, these folks have worked extremely hard to vet every single situation and issue that was brought before them, and they've made sound decisions. And I will argue with anyone out there that wants to argue against that. And I just wanted to make that clear that Commissioner Ross, I appreciate your comments, but we have vetted every single thing that you mentioned this morning. And we'll continue to look at the scientific data and follow the governor and the president and CDC's guidelines. County Manager.
Chairman, with your permission, we'll go up to items 3 and 4, those two public hearings, and then I'll do the things I have on my list, if that's okay.
Perfect.
Item 3 on the agenda is a public hearing with regard to the Dare County Code of Ordinances, the S-12 supplement. Each year we come in and the ordinances that we adopted during the year or the modifications that we made during the year, we put in our ordinance book, and then we reapprove them just to be sure everything's approved and clear. And this is this year's version of that, and you have those in your agenda packet, and I need a motion to approve those ordinances or that codification as we go forward.
Pleasure of the board.
Move to approve.
It's a motion on the floor.
Second.
From Vice Chairman Over to approve. It's been seconded by Commissioner Bateman. Any
Well,
further?
hang on, back up. we got to have a public hearing first.
That's what I thought.
Yes. So,
Okay.
so we'll take a minute to see if,
Yeah, absolutely. See,
I haven't received any comments. We'll take a minute to see if we receive any, and the comment period would remain open. So if we hear any and we need to make modifications, we will. But
Do you need to also read that resolution?
you need,
I don't need to read it, but
Okay, that's okay.
you want to give the clerk some time to see if she gets some emails in?
yeah. I would be surprised because every one of the things we've done has already been approved.
Right.
We're just putting it all together in one place. And
I was looking through our emails, and I don't see anything on the,
yeah, typically, we do not get emails on this.
I know this letter here from the home builders
Right.
references this change.
Yes.
With a flood
Gotcha.
elevation.
That's
There's
right.
agreement on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll come to that next, and, yeah. Okay, we've not received any comments, so move forward.
Okay. So any further discussion then by the board? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.
The next public hearing is with regard to the flood map, flood ordinance and zoning amendments. And we have a letter from the home builders in support of that. I don't know if you want me to read it or not, and we'll.
Yeah, they had, Mr. Graham had sent this, and then he also asked our clerk if we would read it in public comment, so I'm not opposed to that, if you will read that, Bobby.
Sure. Dear Chairman Woodard and Dare County Commissioners, this is a letter dated Friday, May 1st from the Outer Banks Home Builders Association. Thank you for your leadership as our community works to maximize its resilience by revising the flood damage prevention ordinance in preparation for the 2020 flood insurance rate maps, June 19th effective date. The over 500 members of the Outer Banks Home Builders Association appreciate the complexity of the task before you and welcome the opportunity this process presents us to apply our professional knowledge and service to the county. We are thankful for Planning Director Donna Creef and planning staff's responsiveness to our members' recommendations as the ordinances has developed in recent months, and are confident that the text before you offers sound solutions to the challenges of the 2020 firm maps proposed for construction and development standards. The Outer Banks Home Builders Association members began working in early 2017 with the surveying and engineering community to assist local planning staff in designing a new flood prevention measure to address an anticipated reduction in the 2006 firm's flood zone elevations in Dare County. Extensive consideration of historical flooding, previous firms, and topographical data informed a consensus among county and municipal planning staff that administration of 8-foot standards to a revised reference level, the bottom of the lowest floor or utility, would ensure adequate flood protection in X and shaded X zones. Because our members operate in 7 county and municipal jurisdictions with varying regulatory requirements, the Outer Banks Home Builder Association's paramount interest throughout our community-wide flood map discussion has been promoting common sense consistency in the development of new local elevation standards. The Outer Banks Home Builders Association appreciates the proposed FDPO's inclusion of local elevation standards appropriately consistent with this paradigm. In addition, our association has offered extensive technical support to assist planning staff in crafting ordinance language that exactly tailors county regulatory goals to current area construction practices. We appreciate staff's consistent availability for productive discussions to achieve the FDPO that works on paper and in practice for homeowners, builders, and the county, permitting inspection and personnel. Dare County's FDPO clearly reflects planning staff's belief in a cooperative approach to community resilience that incorporates building community stakeholders' interest and expertise as fully as possible. We hope the Outer Banks Home Builders Association's intensive participation in the FDPO process communicates our seriousness about meeting the complex environmental and regulatory challenges involved in residential constructions on our barrier islands. Thank you again for welcome our participation in the Outer Banks cooperative endeavor to address present and future flood risk, an effort we feel serves other coastal communities as a model for stakeholder inclusive regulation to promote sustainable building. And it's signed by Vaughn Robinson, the president, Jay Overton, the legislative chair, and Porter Graham, the government affairs director.
Thank you, Bobby.
And with that, and with no other comments, then I think you have a motion, and
Pleasure of the board.
Motion to approve?
Well, there's
Okay, there's a motion on the floor by Commissioner Bateman to adopt the MAP's revised flood ordinance and zone ordinance amendments as recommended by the planning board. He moves that the flood maps of Dare County, the updated flood damage ordinance and associated zoning ordinance amendments be adopted with an effective date of June the 19th, 2020, and finds it consistent statement submitted by staff, and it's adopted as part of this action. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by the vice chairman. Any further discussion?
If I may,
Yes.
just real quickly,
Absolutely.
clarification, not disagreement in any way. It's page 18. There are actually two page numbers, the larger page 18 in the attachment. And I'm asking only because I'm not as well versed, I think, as some of you all are in terms of the zones and the various flooding. And County Manager, I'm looking at the middle of page 18 for have you got page 18?
no, sir.
Okay, I will wait.
All right, I've got page 18.
Right in the middle of the page, for unincorporated Dare County, the RFPE is as follows. In VE zones, and I'm basically just trying to kind of layman's terms a bit more understand, the base elevation designated effective FIRM plus 1 foot of freeboard. I wish Donna were here. I'd be asking Donna. I know
There
she.
she is.
Where is Donna?
Can you hear Donna?
No voice.
We can't hear her.
Yep.
There you go.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Hi, Donna.
So the 1 foot freeboard in the VE zone, the way that would apply, Commissioner Ross, is you have a number associated with the VE zone. So if it was a VE 10 zone, your first floor of living area has to be at 10 feet. Dare County adds a 1 foot to that, so your first floor would have to be at 11 feet.
Right.
That RFPE refers to the regulatory flood protection elevation, which is that base flood plus the freeboard.
And walk me right down 2, 3, and 4, and I'll be good if you would be so kind. Number 2 is.
Sorry, say that again, please.
Numbers 2, 3, and 4. In AE zones, base flood is designated on effective firm plus 3 feet. Would that be the same or 8? Because this would be a less severe flood zone. So we're basically saying whatever that elevation is, plus 3 or above 8 feet, whichever is greater.
Yes, sir, that is correct. So if you're in an AE4,
Yep.
the freeboard would be 3 feet, or it would be 8 feet. So the 8 feet would apply because it's higher. Some of the flood maps have an AE6 number down on Hatteras, so that would be AE plus 3, so it would be 9 feet for the first floor of living area. So
Got it.
whatever is the higher number in there.
Thank you. I do understand now. Thank you. No need to go through 3 and 4. I can extrapolate them. Thanks, Donna.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions of Donna?
I got, just for clarification, so someone who had a flood insurance bill came due in May, they paid, of course, in the previous zoning standards, their money's gonna be appropriated, their bill will drop down, they'll receive a rebate from, if their flood elevation certificate goes down, they're gonna receive a rebate, or they're not?
It is my understanding that they can contact their insurance
That's right.
agent and say, my flood zone has changed. Am I eligible for a rebate? I've been advised by, I sat through a webinar just the other day with the lady who was a flood insurance agency owner and had been involved in the National Flood Insurance Program, and she said that people were eligible for rebates and they should ask their insurance agents about that.
Okay, so the answer is yes.
Well,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, you gotta ask, but we'll see.
Okay.
Let's just say that.
They're
But
just not gonna give it to you.
I wouldn't hesitate not to ask.
Right.
Right.
Okay, good.
Anyone else?
I would
Yeah,
just like
Jim.
to note and say publicly that even though that you might be in a shaded X or it's not a flood zone anymore, flood insurance is still an important thing to have on your house, as demonstrated by what went on in the north end where it wasn't in a flood zone, had unusual rains, and it's good to have flood
And
insurance.
I can urge with that too, with my company is water damage mitigation and restoration. Do not take flood insurance and just throw it out the door. It's way too important, way too important.
Well, and we've had that campaign, if you recall.
Yes.
No risk is,
Yeah.
low risk is no, so I would not, I would encourage folks to, as well, to maintain it.
To give you a prime example why you should be doing that, my house in Ocracoke, true story. So it's at 6 foot, it was at 6 foot before we raised it up. Now, and I had 3 foot of water in it, now the floodplain in Ocracoke is at 6 foot.
Yeah.
So if, legally speaking, I wouldn't have to raise my house up. I wouldn't
Right.
have to qualify for flood insurance.
Right.
But
You
I
would've
just
had
had
3
3 foot of water in my
Yeah.
house.
Right,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
so,
Crazy.
thank you, Donna.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else? Those in favor of the motion, then, it's been brought forward, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous. That brings us back to item 10, Bobby, in that
Right.
county manager's business.
Yeah, I have a couple of things. First thing is, as you all know, we have a biometrics and a employee wellness program. And as a part of that, we do our biometric screening in the spring of every year. And if you satisfy certain conditions, then you get, as an employee, a $50, I don't know if it's $50, you get a credit towards the cost of your insurance for being healthy and meeting those criteria. This year, we started the biometric testing and didn't finish it, and we've got over 500 of our employees who have not been tested and can't be tested because we can't set up the clinic to bring them all in to be tested before the end of this fiscal year. And so what we would like to do is waive the biometric requirement this year, give the employees the credit as if they had passed it, and then start again afresh next spring. Hopefully we will be past all this and we can get back to normal. This is paid for out of the insurance fund. The insurance fund has sufficient funds to cover that cost. We expect it to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $60,000 or something like that, maybe closer to 70, but somewhere between $60,000 and $70,000 would be the cost to do that, and that's easily paid out of that insurance fund. And so, and that way we can move on forward and not penalize anybody because we weren't able to do the biometric screenings, and I need your approval to do that.
I would like to approve that and have the county manager proceed with that.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor by Commissioner House to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by the vice chair. Any further discussion?
Just a curiosity.
sir.
I'm in favor. Do we know from like last year, the percentage that, I mean, I think it was a pretty high percentage that would have.
We do, that's where that, and I don't know what that is, but that's where that 70,000 was calculated from, that.
Yeah, it was a very
Percentage.
high percentage, which is reassuring. So, yeah, I agree, yeah.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.
And then the last thing that I have, you all, I think, have gotten an email, and I did too, and with regard to what are we going to do about restaurants when the governor allows the restaurants to reopen in what people are anticipating some limited capacity. In the interest of time, I had asked Donna to go ahead and start looking at what our ordinances need to be changed and how we would need to do something to accommodate that. And so she's working on that now. I'd also asked Sheila to check and be sure we don't have any health department issues with doing certain things that they've requested. And she's working on that now too. So having gotten the cart well before the horse, I wanted to come back and talk to you all, make sure you were on board with what is going on and what the discussion's about. So presumably when the governor reopens for restaurants, there's going to be some capacity requirements, whether it's 25% or 50% or whatever, we don't know. But what we anticipate is there would be some capacity requirements. And let's just say you've got a 100-seat restaurant, and he then says you can open it at 50% of capacity indoors, and you got to space out your tables, and you can only have 4 at a table, and they got to be 6 feet apart and all that stuff. So that means you've got half of your capacity. You know, your fixed costs don't change because once you open, but you've got 50% less capacity. So the question has become, could we allow that other 50% capacity outside? And if you could put up picnic tables or whatever outside, space them sufficiently apart, then you could allow the restaurants to, somehow recapture that capacity loss without endangering the public in any way. To do that, though, requires or creates some problems with our ordinances in that some restaurants don't have land. They have parking lot. And so the obvious place to put those extra tables is in the parking lot. Well, when you take up parking spaces, then you've violated the parking requirements. And so for us to allow that, we've got to figure out what are we going to do about the parking requirements. And one of the things that Don and I talked about, at least for Dare County, is to say, you can do that and you can do it in the parking lot, but you can't allow people to park on the right of way and that kind of thing. And to the extent that parking limits you getting back to full capacity, then so be it. But you got to be able to park the car somewhere, or whatever other ideas come up. But that's one of the issues, is to deal with parking and how do we handle, the parking side of it. Again, we think that those are things that we can address if you all are amenable to going forward. The second question that they asked was, could they have on-premise kiosks or food trucks on their restaurant site? And we already allow that, so that shouldn't be a problem for Dare County, at least. I don't know about in the towns, but in the county, that won't be an issue. And then the last two things, one is to expedite approval, and 2, to waive fees. Well, we're working on the expedited approval because I already asked them to start unless you tell me to stop today. And the waiver of fees, we don't have to charge a fee to modify our own ordinances. So that's where we are. If you all tell us that, yes, we're on the right track, then Donna's going to work on this with her staff and try to come up with, the modifications we need to our ordinances and have them back to you on the 18th at that meeting. We'd ask you now to allow us to do the public hearing sight unseen, just so we can get the public hearing done on the 18th. We don't have to wait 2 more weeks to adopt the ordinances. And so we would draft an ordinance. We'll share it with you all when it's drafted, but we'll go ahead and set the public hearing now so that we have time to do that, and we'll be in a position to adopt it on the 18th. And if you all have modifications or changes or ideas, when you see it, you can tell us and we can make those changes on the 18th. Or if you tell us on the 18th, we can make the changes then as well. Again, our goal was to expedite this, and for us to do that, we had to go ahead and get started, so we did.
Move to approve this.
Okay, motion on the floor by the Vice Chairman to approve it, and it's been seconded by Commissioner Bateman. Any further discussion then?
I've got a question. This would just be temporary ordinances. It wouldn't be something that would be permanent.
Correct. Our thinking was it would be there's 2 ways to do it. You could do it for the duration of the pandemic and have no idea what that is, or you could do it for 6 months or a year. I don't know. We'll come up with a time and talk about it, and you all tell us. I mean, it's easier just to say for 6 months and then come back in 6 months and see where we are.
Yeah, if we need to extend that or whatever. I think that'd be.
And then everybody has some certainty. So, but we'll do that in what you see, and if you don't like the way we did it, you tell us and we'll fix it.
Gotcha. Yeah, I just wanted to get that out there, that it would be a temporary thing and not a permanent.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comment?
I'd just like to thank you guys for thinking out of the box. because it's definitely something that we're going to have to look at. And keep in mind too, we're only looking at 10 weeks. You know, best case scenario, everything comes back and they just hit us all at one time, retail everything. It's only going to be for 10 weeks that those people are going to be here because our governors and so forth are going to get those kids back to school as soon as possible. Some are talking about going back earlier in August to try to regroup some of what they've lost in the previous year. I know, and having said that, we might be looking at 8 weeks instead of 10 weeks, so, but thank you for thinking out of the box.
Thank you.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
There's a motion on the floor. Is those in favor of that motion then signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.
We'll proceed.
Thank you, County Manager. Mr. Clausen, you have anything else for us today?
Just so you know, and in a way, I want to thank all you for doing all of our policy stuff and models and stuff, but you got the Moody's review about 4 weeks ago. They do that once a year and go ahead and issue their report. And just so you know, we had Fitch Ratings does it once every 2 years, and it's a lot more comprehensive when we did that 2 weeks ago. And the good news is they haven't issued a report, so they don't think they have a reason to issue a report. So that is a positive thing. So
No news is good news, huh?
yeah, and then just so the local government commission meets this morning to approve the debt refunding. The bids for health and human services are this afternoon, and the closing for that refunding is next Tuesday. So we're moving forward with everything.
Good job.
Great. Thank you, Dave. Okay, that brings us to adjournment. And is there a motion to adjourn until 5 p.m. on May the 18th?
Motion to adjourn.
There's a motion to adjourn by Commissioner House. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by the Vice Chairman. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.